Hello, John.
Albert.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the housing crisis in Ireland. It's worldwide now. That everybody knows in the world that we've got a serious, serious problem, and we got lots of people leaving the country, and we got lots of people that can't come into the country because there's nowhere for them to live, and the Irish people themselves are being evicted. So let's talk about it.
Exactly. Um, it's a very serious situation that have been inflicted on Irish people that deserve better. Um, that deserve better. Um, they've reintroduced, or rather, got rid of, which was apparently during this COVID closed down. Uh, they allowed people to be able to stay in rented accommodation without them being subject to the sort of outrageous charges that people that are in rented accommodation that the people that own these apartments are often charging exorbitant rents for those apartments. And those apartments are just basic one bedroom or two-bedroom apartments. And there's nothing wonderful about them. The tenants now, they've done away with the rights the tenants had to be not to be evicted or removed from their accommodation that they've had maybe for some years and paying extraordinary rents, and some of them probably getting some rent allowance from the state because of the high prices of these apartments.
Yeah, I think we look at the problems of why this housing crisis in Ireland. Okay, so there's a few reasons. One of them is um, that the cost of property has gone sky high now. Do you want to talk about a few reasons why people are finding it difficult to get accommodation?
Yes. No. Uh, there's two things. There's a few things here. First of all, people have a right, a natural right to be housed, not to be put to the pin of their collar with the high cost of rented accommodation in Ireland and the high cost of buying property, particularly in Dublin, buying a house, a very basic house with a little garden, perhaps in the front and the back, and somewhere to park a car, assuming you have a car, and people have cars. Now, so the high price of renting accommodation. Why has this government? Because previous governments before they say the last 20 years or so, after we got our freedom of the country, the government inherited an awful shortage of houses for people. People were living in tenements in Dublin, in Gardner Street. Many families in these tenement houses that were 4 and 5 stories high, usually four in Gardner Street and other parts of the city, Mountjoy Square. And they actually only had one toilet for the whole families living in those places. Atrocious conditions, which I remember when I was young, coming in at a young age from Houghton County, Dublin, and landing in what was called Amy Street. It's called Conley, I think, now or something else. But I knew where it's at, and I still refer to it because it's in Amy Street. And anyway, we used to walk up the father. Then we walked up with the father. He was a gardener, but he would be in plain clothes. And we'd be walking up Talbot Street, and I was always afraid of the sort of people that I saw on the street. Young little poor children selling papers. Herald Mail they used to shoot. There was the Herald Mail, they were the only two papers. And they were living in these tenements. People had to work at a young age to try and bring something into the home. Wasn't that deplorable? So the government, when they found that they could do something, they did something, and it wasn't they didn't have that much money that times. They built houses for these people in the Lake of Crumlin and in the north side, and in parts of Coolock and parts of the north side, and on the south side, and in Ringsend and these places. Now, so they gradually did away and house people, and people had great joy in moving into a house where they had a garden and they had perhaps a bathroom that they never had before. So there was a lot of good done in the early stages when the country was relatively poor and wages were very small. So they did a lot of good work and people were housed. But now that the country has turned the corner, shall we say, and is relatively wealthy, considering one of the most prosperous countries in the world and in the EU as well. But they have neglected the people, the Irish people, atrociously. People are entitled to affordable housing to rent and to buy. But if you adopt policies that this government has adopted, facilitating those people that want to make profits at the expense of Irish people needing affordable housing to rent and buy. They're in the EU and they implement a lot of the laws in the EU. Why don't they look at France, Germany, Italy, and other countries in Europe that don't have a housing problem? And why is that? Because they provide the speculators and money grabbers that only think of their own profit and not the people whatsoever, and the government is guilty of that. Any government worth their salt would be implementing policies so that people could afford to rent and have guarantees for 35 years as they have in other countries. They're in the EU. Are they blind to what's going on there, or does it not suit their purposes? Suffice to say that Irish people deserve better. We were treated badly by the invader years ago. Innocent Irish people with families and children. Their houses was often knocked down to make way for sheep by those absentee landlords and and with the support of the state at the time that had no respect for the people in this country, for Irish people. This crowd has implemented similar policies like the evictions that happened years ago with the invader. We know them all. We saw them and we shed a tear for those Irish, our brothers and sisters that were treated in such an abominable manner.
Yeah,
Now, behold this government. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll look at solutions anyway. So at the moment, okay, in Dublin, there's no shortage of land, okay? If you look at the amount of land that the government owns and the HSE, CIE, for example, CIE up in Inchicore, there's 70 acres up there, okay? And it could be better used to build housing estates, to build apartment blocks, whatever they need to build, okay? CIE has land all over the place, but the HSE particularly, okay? And then, of course, you got the GAA. The GAA have land all over the country. I think there's 1,800 GAA pitches, and half of them are never used. So I'd be looking at things like that to free. There is land there, okay, just to free it up and reorganize it a little bit, okay. The money is there. The government is paying nearly $1 billion to the HAP scheme, which is a disgrace, every year.
What's that scheme? What scheme did you say?
HAP, it's called.
Scheme? What does that mean?
So the HAP scheme basically is that the government pays the money directly to the landlord. Okay, but it's dead money basically. Okay,
to the landlords.
Yeah.
So their pockets has been well lined. Now, hold on, Oliver. Let me speak here now. Do you think this government, with all this land, is going to do anything good for the Irish people? Heretofore, they haven't. I have very little hope in them doing anything of that calibre whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Sinn Féin, when there's another general election, if they become the new party in power, I implore them to have a look at what goes on in the EU, in France, and these places. Do not follow the path of this Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Green Party agenda and previous ones over the past number of years, facilitating people to make money at the expense of the Irish people. I don't expect anything about all this land that they have for them to do anything, bar the people rise up and demand to be treated the way their brothers and sisters are treated in Europe. Now, that is the situation. And they could have more land that they could do anything with. But if they follow the pattern that they're doing, it'll be facilitating the already robbers that we have at the expense of the Irish people. Provide homes at affordable prices in Dublin and every city in the country,
The,
because there's no way what the prices that they're expected to fetch in
the,
overcrowded um, estates in the like of Castleknock in Dublin and every other estate, prices that are absolutely outrageous for people to rent and no rights. They're entitled to rights, and we demand rights,
I
the
know
same
that
as in other
I think, John,
civilized countries.
the biggest obstacle, and the government knows this, okay, and I don't think they say it, right, okay. So there is the land there, there is the money there, okay, and I think the will is there, but there's one big obstacle, and that's tradesmen. There's no proper amount of tradesmen in Ireland, okay. So the government stopped doing apprenticeships about 10 years ago. So for I think it was the last tiling course for a tiler was in 2013 or 2012. And that's one of the biggest problems. So they need to prioritize bringing in the people that come into the country. There's only a few coming in now because of the housing crisis. But the people they let into the country, they should make sure that they are skilled, priority given to skilled tradespeople, builders, people who have trades to rebuild Ireland.
Correct. Of course, the unfortunate thing about that, Oliver, is that a lot of these people will not, English will not be their first language. Um, Also, they are from other countries, and the first allegiance, quite frankly, is often to their own country where they come from. Uh, there's quite a few of them here now, and they're not noted in my experience living here, and for many years, and thank God, so far, still here with my opinions derived over a lifetime. So I don't see them fitting into the culture. I don't see them going out of their way. The government is encouraging people that we call multicultural, and they're denying the religious practices of Catholics in schools and in other places. So this is something that there's so many angles, and you were talking about apprentices. I mean, these are expected to sort of. The civil servants have been in advising the governments for years. What are they doing? Are they asleep? Is there something lacking up here? Have they property owners as well because they're well paid? Now, be that as it may, the first thing is to do for Irish people to have affordable place to rent. And when I say affordable, rent so that they can rent for 35 years, the same as they can do in other countries, at the cost of living as is, not what these property speculators expect. In Palmerstown and Dublin at the present time, there are four large apartment blocks being built by vulture funds. Are they for sale, do you think? No, they're all for rent at exorbitant prices. This is kind of considered a gold digger's bonanza money at the expense of the people. It's time for that to be changed and for rents to be set at the cost of living as is. Nothing to do with anything else. And they should be given rights at the 35-year leases as they're rented, as they have in other countries. And at the cost of living as is, not at what any person that has an apartment to rent or a house to rent to think they can charge what they like. There has to be a sort of a real change, and for some reason, I don't expect the crowd that has been ruling the country. They're not stupid. I don't think they're stupid, but they have neglected the Irish people, and that's the end of it.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
That is the end of it.
That's the end of it. Then we've come to the end.
Oh, have we? Well, as I say, I demand that they do what they should be had been doing for years. Put the Irish people's interests first and stop interfering with our welfare and inflicting various losses on their poor shoulders. We've spoken about various episodes that they have inflicted on people. Take your hands off our throats and treat Irish people with much more respect than you have done. Thank you very much.
It's a powerful ending, John Malone.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
yeah.